Hello, welcome to Now is the Time. I'm Meri Crouley. Sex trafficking, pornography, is there a link? Well, on today's program, we're going to have Veronica Stevens is going to be sharing about the link of pornography, which you're going to see some of the graphics on the pornography and how porn kills. It's actually that they have shown that you're seeing all the Hollywood, things coming out with Harvey Weinstein and Corey Feldman, and people are starting to realize that there's a problem with pornography. And Veronica today is going to be talking about how the pornography is only fueling sex trafficking. It's become epidemic proportion where people are saying that they can't live without sex, and they're doing things that they're literally raping people and maiming people for life sometimes. Even as you can see that women are endangered in this culture right now. So today we're going to talk to you about victimization with pornography and how you can make a way out, because you may be their only hope. Welcome to the program, Veronica.
Thank you.
Now, you go around the world. You have a foundation called Action Force Network.
Correct.
And you've been speaking at many different groups, throughout the, the country. And, you have been finding out, they've been finding out that pornography fuels sex trafficking.
Right. Yeah, I have been on the prevention side of this for quite some time, speaking at high schools, youth groups, community forums, government agencies. And the reality is, I don't think we're going to be able to get our hands around this sex trafficking pandemic until we get to the root of it. And I absolutely believe the root is pornography.
So, we're hearing more and more people coming out, Me Too, the Twitter saying Me Too. And it seems like every day there's another actress. Every day there's somebody else that's saying that, either a politician or an actor. Why do you think they're coming out now?
I think it just takes one, and why now is a question that I'm actually asking as well, because I know that this article was supposed to come out about Harvey Weinstein like 3 years ago, and the New York Magazine or New York Times squashed it then. I honestly think that God is cleaning house, that it's just time, and it's starting to bubble up. And once one person is believed, then that's all it takes, because they're sitting there saying, well, they believe Rose McGowan and Harvey did that to me, so now they have to believe me as well. And so sometimes it just takes the courageousness of one to be willing to not only speak out for themselves, but to name the perpetrator, to name the one who accosted them, and then that really will embolden others to share their story.
Well, and we're talking about pornography. Our country has been sexualized.
Yes, absolutely.
Our young people, I see these little 2-year-olds with iPads, and just, so, what age do they state that the normal, what is the statistics on pornography?
So right now, the research is showing that the average age that a boy has come across pornography for the first time in the U.S. is 8 years old. Now, there's some research that says as old as 12, but anywhere from the age of 8 to 12. Now, an 8-year-old boy does not know what porn is, so they're not Googling it. They literally are stumbling on it. It's on gaming sites where they can link and they don't know what they're linking to, and then porn pops up. It's on the history of the family computer where they go on the history and it's been pulled up. A friend will send them a link to a YouTube video and they think that it's going to be the funny one that they just saw the day before, and it happens to be porn. So that is, but for girls, the average age is 11 to 14 for their first exposure to porn.
And so why is the tie between pornography and human sexual trafficking?
To me, it's just undeniable. For one, I work with survivors, and I've yet to meet a survivor who hasn't said that the buyer would come in and they would have an iPhone or a tablet and pull up porn and say, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. And so if it hadn't been for porn, then they wouldn't be purchasing a girl for an hour and wanting to act out on what they've seen. What people, again, research bears this out, but the porn industry denies it, and usually if you're addicted, you deny it, is that they say if you just watch it, it's not harmful, it's fine. But that's not what the psychologists are saying. That's not what research is showing. It's saying that it's a progressive, it's actually a gateway. So at first you just see images, and then that's no longer satisfying. Then you need to see videos, then that's no longer satisfying. Then you need to see acts of aggression, progression, then that's not satisfying, because there's a science of the brain where when you see those images, dopamine is released. Just like it is when you smoke pot, when you take heroin, dopamine is released. Well, dopamine creates a threshold. And so you see the naked images at first, dopamine's released. The next time you see the naked images, dopamine's not released because it's already seen this. So if you want that high, you've got to progress and see now the videos, then dopamine is released. So they are now finding that it's as addictive as heroin and cocaine.
Well, and that's why, even looking back, what's coming to my mind now, the serial murderer Ted Bundy.
Yes.
I mean, he was walking down the alley, and I think there was a man that put out his Playboys to throw away, and he just started looking at the pornography in the Playboy, and it seemed pretty, tame, but little by little he needed a little more, a little
Absolutely
more,
right.
a little more. And maybe people aren't going to become serial murderers, but it's a progression, just like any type of ism is.
Yeah, absolutely right. Ted Bundy, when he was interviewed by Dr. James Dobson, it was the day of his execution, I think. He did an amazing interview, and it was his last interview. He was literally going to be killed. And he was saying just that it was an escalation. He said, listen, I was raised by Christian parents. People want to go back and say that I was molested as a child, that something traumatic happened in my childhood, that my dad must have beat me. He said, I had great parents. I was raised in the church, but then I stumbled on the Playboys, and then it wasn't enough. I just had to progress, and then just watching it wasn't enough. I had to act out on what I saw. That's what Elizabeth Smart, who was kidnapped at age 14 in Utah and was a sex slave for 9 months, that's what she said of her captor too, is that he would bring in these awful, either Hustler or the worst grotesque magazines, and point, and she said that his face would light up and saying, this is what I want to do, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do this. She was 14 when this was happening, and she absolutely says, I don't believe I would have been kidnapped and been a sex slave if he had not had access to pornography.
Your story, and we're just going to interject this briefly. At 4 years old, you were violated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I suffered my first sexual assault when I was age 4, and then I was a victim of a group sexual assault at age 5. I witnessed my brother's sexual assault when he was 7, and he ended up getting help. I mean, the perpetrator ended up getting caught, but he didn't get help. So he ended up violating me starting at age 11. And that went on for the remainder of my time in the childhood home. When I was in counseling, and this is why that whole pornography connection is so important to me. When I was in counseling, because of the things that my brother did to me, my counselor, I said, why me? Why did he choose me? And he said, for one thing, you were accessible, you were available. He was supposed to be your protector. Your parents were off at work. He was supposed to protect you. You were easy access. He said, but because of things you told me he did to you, there's no way a boy of his age, because he would have been 14, would have known about these acts. So he definitely, in my opinion, would have had access to porn. So Veronica, you were probably just a prop.
Well, and I've been studying this because I'm doing this documentary about sexual trafficking called Freedom Cry. And some of you watching, I know this is really hard to listen to, but we're dealing with the sexualization of our culture. And the way out of this thing, and this is why it's going to be exposed.
Absolutely.
And God is exposing this in our culture for a reason. Men, it's not like women are not objects. We're human beings. Mm-hmm. And, God loves men. He created sex. He created it, under the context of marriage. And it's not just for the pornification of our culture.
That's right.
What would you say to the parents or the people that are watching and they say, this sounds like unbelievable? What are the statistics? I interviewed many people about this subject throughout the last 15 years. I heard there's literally 100,000 registered sexual offenders in California. It could be more now.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. Listen, danger, as parents, that's what we do. We introduce our kids to danger to protect them from danger, right? We actually walk them up to crosswalks and hold their hands and say, it's dangerous, don't don't step out in the street without holding mommy and daddy's hand. We expose them for the sake of protection, but we don't do that when it comes to sex crimes or pornography, because we want them to remain innocent. We want them to remain naive. But in that protection, it is a target-rich environment. If a person that has not been raised in a home where they are saying, you're going to have a smartphone now, honey, but let me tell you, that's also going to give you access to the internet, and there's some things on the internet that you don't want to expose yourself to. And it's pornography, and this is what it's showing. And honey, it's going to damage you, and it's going to make you, if it's a boy, tell them straight up, it'll make you impotent. Because that's actually what addiction to porn for men, because that dopamine needs, that they're not even going to be able to be aroused by their wife anymore. It's not. That part of their brain has shut off. It is killing relationships, it's killing marriages, and it's destroying careers. This is something that the church, in my opinion, should have been on the forefront, because it is such a pervasive evil. And God has given us the weapons to combat evil, but instead we are protecting our youth groups, and we don't want to talk about it in churches. Meanwhile, we have a generation gone mad, and we have sexualized a whole generation of youth and think they can handle this, and they can't.
Well, and so I just interviewed somebody, Opal Singleton, and she was telling me, she wrote a book called Seduce, The Grooming of America's Teenagers, and she goes into schools, she's working with the police force, the task force. She's an incredible woman, but she said when you give your kid a smartphone, unattended, it's like opening them up to 3 to 5 million pedophiles.
Yeah, absolutely. I often say that a 16-year-old girl would have literally better luck walking down Skid Row at 2 a.m. in the morning in her underwear than she would actually on a smartphone and on social media. So much grooming takes place, which is why Action Force Network, that's what we do. We get into classrooms as well, and we give them how to be safe online, what social media, how to protect yourself. Never, ever, ever should any teenager ever, or even college student, ever go into direct messaging. That's where the grooming's going to take place.
So when you say grooming, people may be listening because there's certain language that I've found out in the anti-trafficking movement. What is it to be groomed? So
grooming means, and it's any type that there's a predator who is looking for a victim. They will begin to groom, and that basically means they befriend and gain the trust of that person. They can also groom the entire family. So let's say it's an uncle, and so they will actually begin grooming the child as, you can trust me, I love you, I'm safe, and by the way, I was out shopping and I bought this for you. And so they start showering with gifts, and so this person is just amazing. Of course, the parents trust this individual, whether it's a coach, it's a teacher, it's a Sunday school teacher, or an uncle. And so when they say, hey, you know what, I'm actually going to be going Saturday. I thought it'd be really fun to take him to Disneyland. Could I take him to Disneyland? Of course, because he's groomed the parents that he's safe, he's trusted, he's a Christian, he's a politician, whatever trusted individual he is. The parents say, sure. And then that's when the violations can take place. And typically the violation, this is another link, is that part of the grooming is they'll actually expose their victim, potential victim, to pornography. And it numbs them down. And so they'll say, hey, look at what I found. What do you think about this magazine? And it's not going to be hardcore stuff. It's going to be naked pictures. And they'll look at it and they'll say, that's kind of fun, huh? Do you want me to take your picture? So they'll actually use pornography to groom the victims, to normalize it.
Well, aren't more and more girls, aren't they sending pictures, they're getting, naked pictures, send me a picture of your breast.
Oh, absolutely.
Or send me a picture of this.
Yeah. Sexting is a real thing. And again, it's because of pornography, because they're exposed to this, that the boys, this generation coming up, just assumes that they have the right to ask a girl who they might want to date, might not even be a girlfriend, just who they're just friends with, hey, why don't you take a picture with your top off? I'd really like to see it. And the girls are a little bit in a quandary, going, well, I don't really want to. But then if they're not, then they're demonized of, oh, you're such a prude, you think you're so much better than I am. And then they're ostracized. Well, the number one need of a teenager is a sense of belonging, a sense of community. They have to fit in. So the minute that they're being ostracized, they literally, survival kicks in. Okay, but just don't show anybody. And actually, research now shows that 90% of males in college have been online and exposed to pornography by the time they reach college. 90%. Now, 89% of porn shows violence against women, to now where they're saying this Generation Z, which is the youngest generation, Generation Z, they are saying pornography is the #1 sex educator of our kids. They're being taught not only about sex, but about violent sex before they ever learn about intimacy, about the sanctity of marriage, about the sanctity of sex in marriage. Because that's not approached usually in churches and in homes until they're in middle school. We'll start talking about this. But porn has already started teaching them at age 8. And they are beginning to get hardwired for this. Yes, it's insidious in our culture.
And so for you watching, this seems pretty overwhelming. But, you know, God is making a way of escape. He's actually doing something, I believe, with this exposing of everything.
Absolutely.
It's a good thing.
It's a
so for the
beautiful
people
thing.
watching, parents watching, you know, people watching, they think, what can be done? What can you do to protect your children? What do you do when you go in and teach on this? What do you say?
So when I go in and teach a classroom, I actually focus on the positive meaning. What's a healthy relationship look like? And what are body boundaries? I mean, the #1 thing is, like, because I also say in Hollywood we're seeing it, but they're grooming our kids by the shows that they're producing. I mean, think about The Bachelorette or The Bachelor, right? So you've got 24 women vying for the affection of this one man. They throw him in a home. It is crazy. And then they'll do one-on-one dates. Well, the one-on-one date will always be the woman doing something that she's terrified of. So she's terrified of heights, then they have to do a parachute jump, or they're going to have to scale down this multi-story building. She'll be crying, and what does he say? Baby, come on. I just want to see if you and I can work out, and I'll keep you safe. I won't let anything happen to you. And she'll go, no, I don't really want to do it. No, I want to know if we can work out, and I promise you, I'll keep you safe, I'll keep you safe. Darned if she doesn't harness up and she does it. What if she just looked at him and went, I said no. Talk about boundaries. Talk about respecting yourself. And yet we subject ourselves thinking, just do it, just do it. And we buy into this notion that no doesn't mean no, and that a person could tell you something that you don't want to do, but you do it anyways, and as long as you come out safe, it's all good. Not that he violated the fact that you said no and he didn't respect that. So I actually introduced that analogy to the classroom because they have all seen that show and love it and say, girls, when you say no, is it supposed to mean no?
Well, and don't you think that the women in the society are the ones that really carry a lot of the power? If they said no and really meant it.
Yeah.
That then the guys would say, well, maybe they might go on to the next one.
Right.
But if enough girls just said no.
Right. If there was a revolution of girls banding together saying, you know what, we're going to respect our bodies. When we say no, it actually means no, which means that if you ask me for a date and I said no, that doesn't mean send me roses the next day and text me the day after. I've actually turned down that offer, and I would appreciate you respecting the fact that I turned down that offer. It's in the little things, and that's actually what I teach in the classrooms. There's 2 words I tell girls that can save their life. When you're 13, when you're 8, when you're 17, no matter what age. The 2 words that can save your life are thank you. Thank you. That's it. So if a person comes up to them and they're shopping at the mall, this is what grooming will look like, and this is what a trafficker who wants to get his hands on a girl will look like. He'll come up to her, let's say he's about 22, she's 14, she's 15. He'll look at her and say, oh my gosh, you are so pretty. If she shrugs her shoulders and looks down and goes, no, I'm not that pretty, it's game on, because they look for the insecure ones. And he knows she is ripe for grooming. He's going to be able to shower her with praises and buy her gifts and woo her into a dating relationship. And that dating relationship will end up turning violent, and he will turn her out and sell her. It sounds crazy, but it can happen in 2 weeks. So I tell the girls, when somebody comes up and says, you're pretty, square your shoulders back, look them dead in the eye and go, thank you, and walk away. Because you know what they're not going to do, what that trafficker or recruiter's not going to do? Go chasing after you, going, what's your name? By the way, what's your name? No, you've already showed that you're confident. You can look them in the eye, you know who you are, and you keep walking. Now, that sounds so easy, but think about our culture. If I go up to you, and like today I did, I said, man, you're beautiful. And you said, oh, yeah, thank you. You are a strong woman. You know your worth. I would say 99% of females don't. Usually when you give a girl a compliment, she'll say, oh, thank you, but you know what? I actually got this on sale. It didn't cost very much. And they say, your hair's pretty. Did you get it cut? I did, but I think they cut too much off. I'm waiting for it to grow. We are conditioning our girls in America to diminish compliments, because if we actually say thank you, we're conceited. Who does she think she is? We diminish, we get more, we continue to diminish. It's this dance we play. So we do have to change our culture, and I'm trying to create this revolution amongst middle school girls and high school girls. Say thank you. Say thank you.
Well, that's really good. And, you know, I want you listening to know that we're at a time, I believe we're at a pivot point in culture, and that God is getting ready to bring forth the greatest show on earth. But first, he has to expose
That's right.
the dirt. I mean, there's a rug, and underneath it, there's a lot of stuff swept under, and he's got to say, you know, expose this. You were molested when you were young.
Yeah.
And you said you put these, you know, your violations in a box.
Right.
That's how you dealt with it. I know I've interviewed psychiatrists. A lot of times they say they will have disassociation or actually have multiple personality disorders to even cope. But God gave you the 4th step.
Yes.
To get out of that. What are the 4 steps?
So, yes, and that DID, which is dissociative identity disorder, and I was absolutely diagnosed with that. And what happens is at the time of the violation, it is too painful, too much for our mind to be able to handle. So in that moment, it literally just shatters, and one mind becomes many. And you do kind of shift in and out when you need to be strong, and you tap into the different facets of your personality. It's like taking an orange, and then you take, and there's little segments. It's still all part of the same orange, but it's a different segment. And so anybody who has been diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder, and they call it fragmentation, and they say those parts need to be integrated. Well, let me tell you something. We serve a 3-part being who is one. We have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But if you go deeper into the scriptures, we'll find out he's much more than that. If you want healing, you call on Jehovah Rapha. If you want financial provision, you call on Jehovah Jireh. We serve one God. It's one, but he's so many facets. So in that time of violation, when you go like this, you've never been more like God than in that moment. It is something that God gave us as humans to survive. So, yes, I operate in parts, and he gave me those 4 parts of healing: the conceal, to reveal, to deal, to heal.
And so all of you, we're coming down to the end of the show, and I'm going to have, you know, Veronica back on because this is just so fascinating. I myself went through a very, very tumultuous past in some areas of my life. And the last several years that he was dealing with many things with me. Sometimes I would self-medicate through alcohol with drinking wine. And I'm just being very raw right now and real. That, you know what, God said to me, face your pain, it won't remain. Face your fear, and it will disappear. Right now, we are going to pray for you. Because I believe there's some of you watching now that have so much pain, and you don't know how to deal with it. Maybe you're, you know, maybe you're eating food. I mean, maybe you're drinking. Maybe you're doing drugs. Maybe you're smoking pot. Maybe you're doing porn. I mean, whatever it is. But it's the moment of truth where you finally just say, you know, God, help me. Here am I. You know, God, heal me. And so today, just look up to God and say, God, help me. Help. And he will. And, you know, he said, call upon me in times of trouble. Jeremiah 33:3. He said, call upon me in times of trouble, and I will show you great and mighty things that you know not of. You know, God is for you. He's not against you. And God created sex. He created women and men. He created marriage, but it's not to be abused, confused, or refused. It's meant to have a relationship where when you have intimacy, it's where you're giving one to another. It's not just being an object and violation. Right. And so, you know, Veronica, you have a book called Boxes of Secrets. I'm going to offer this today on my program. if you will send in a donation of $25 or more, I will send you her book, Boxes of Secrets. I'm doing a documentary about human trafficking called Freedom Cry. And, you know, we need to raise about $50,000, you know, in the next month. So any donation would be appreciative. You can go on my website at mericrouley.com. That's spelled M-E-R-I-C-R-O-U-L-E-Y. And her book literally tells her own story and goes into detail about how God set her free. And you can also go to Veronica's website at actionforcenetwork.org, and you can email her as well. Veronica, just in closing, you know, what would you say to young girls watching? What's the best advice you can just give to them in a minute or so?
I would say that God created you to be so unique and so special, and that there's a call on your life. And know that if something happened in your past, that God, because he created choice, he did not, though, relinquish his right to be able to heal you from that. And Satan knew the call on your life, so he tried to take you out when you were young. Go past that, let God heal you, do that 4-step process, and go into that destiny. Because I am telling you that if that happened to you, then there must have been something big, huge that God had in store for Satan to actually target you at such a young age.
Well, thank you, Veronica, and thank you for watching Now is the Time. Remember, you know, often you have to go through a mess to get a message. Often you have to go through a test to get a testimony. Just make these, instead of being a victim, you'll be a victor. And even you'll have a testimony. It said they overcome by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon. God bless you.